Hello and welcome to IN239 3D Animation 2 at ButlerCC with Jon Simpson. This is Module 6, Dynamics. Max uses MassFX to simulate physics. Open the MassFX toolbar by right-clicking an empty area on the main toolbar. Once open, click the first icon in the MassFX toolbar to open the MassFX tools. We will be looking at MassFX rigid body objects. These are split into three types. Dynamic objects, which are objects completely under the control of the simulation. Kinematic objects, an object that can be animated and will affect dynamic objects in the simulation but not be affected by them. And finally, static objects. Static objects remain motionless and affect dynamic rigid bodies in the simulation. Scale matters when running simulations. I will be using centimeters. The cube I will be working with is 10 centimeters square. The first example will be a dynamic rigid body, completely under the control of the simulation. There are presets to set mass, friction, and other options. In the shape type, there are options for the physical hole shape that will make up the rigid body. Leave this at box for now. We will explore them as we go on. Tick the Show Shaded Holes button to see the holes in the viewport. When we run the simulation, we see the cube fall under the influence of gravity. Some of the options that we can set include whether or not to use ground collisions, which are currently set to 0, gravity, not only how strong but also the direction, and much more. The help file explains each of these options in detail. Two options to pay close attention to are substeps and use high velocity collisions. I recommend setting the substeps to 30 and turning off high-speed collisions. Also, turn on Use Adaptive Forces if it is not on. The next example is a kinematic rigid body. This type can be animated, then put under the control of the simulation if you want. In the first simulation, the kinematic body has no animation, so it remains still. As the dynamic body falls, it will be affected by, but not affect, the kinematic rigid body. The kinematic body can change to dynamic at any time during the simulation. Here I have set the change to happen at frame 20. Now, the kinematic body remains still till frame 20, then changes type to dynamic and falls under the influence of gravity. The final type of rigid body is called static. It does not move and is not affected by dynamic rigid bodies, but dynamic bodies are affected by them. To quickly create many instances of my dynamic body, I can use the Array tool found in the Tools menu drop-down. Turn on the preview, then manipulate the values so you have a one-directional array going up, with the blocks close enough to rest on top of one another. When I run the simulation this time, something goes wrong. This is due to the physical shape we have set for the rigid body. The box type, while simple and easy to calculate, isn't very accurate, and when the blocks are close, it can read them as crossing over into each other, causing them to explode. By changing the shape type to convex, it will better match the cube shape. Back to the Array tool to quickly create a 2D array containing 1,000 cubes with dynamic rigid bodies applied, waiting to be interacted upon. A sphere with a kinematic rigid body applied will allow me to animate the ball smashing into the cubes and have it affect them. Animate the sphere in the usual way. Here I am using frames 0 to 40 to move the ball into the cubes. In the Modify panel, I tick the Until frame and set it to 38. The simulation will take over the animation of the ball at that point. Press the Simulate button in the Mass Effects toolbar to view the simulation. To actually create the keys needed to store the animation, we need to bake the simulation. In the Mass Effects tools, click the second tab. In the Simulation Baking panel, either select Bake All, or if you only wish to bake selected, select the rigid bodies you wish to bake and choose Bake Selected. Max will now simulate and record every keyframe needed for the simulation. Mass Effects is not only useful for destruction, but also creation. In this example, I will show you how to fill a jar with rigid bodies. Create a container however you like, and create a sphere that will fit through the opening. Apply a static rigid body to the container. Right away we have a problem. The shell of the rigid body does not match the shape of the bottle. Since this is a static rigid body, we can set the shape type to original. This option is only available to the static rigid body. Now the rigid body shell matches the shape of the bottle. Add a dynamic rigid body to the ball, make several instances, and let the simulation do the work. Once the simulation has ran, use the Capture Transform buttons in the Mass Effects tools to capture the new position of the selected rigid bodies. Then repeat the process until the jar is full. Next week we will explore how to have forces interact with our simulations, learn how to make a chain, and look at adding cloth simulations. Till then, have fun with physics in 3ds Max with Mass FX.